She doesn't have any hair left on her head. No, mira, ven aquí. Sit down. Okay. I grew up in a Catholic home and in a big family in West Virginia. And there was some abuse, anyway. So as a teenager, I had a lot of emotional pain. And I was raped and then later attempted rape. And so I just had a lot, I just lived with this emotional pain. And so I was smart, but my goal in high school was to try every drug I ever heard of. And my best friend and I ran with a biker gang and cussed like sailors, And then when we got into university, we were like, okay, we don't want, talking like that's not cool anymore. But I'll just share this, that I was really involved in the biker gang and really tied up in that. And my mom one day just walked up to me in the backyard and she said to me, Maureen, I'd never talked to her about the abuse or anything, but she walked up to me and she said, Maureen, it doesn't matter what has happened to you in the past, you have a choice about your future. And my biker boyfriend had just broken up with me, and I was like killing myself to try to get him back. But that word was a word from God that just came into my soul and cut that off. And that was the end of being involved with the bikers, although I became well known in university because I had the best drug connections among the bikers. Anyway, I was in university studying art, and I got called in for a conference with one of the professors, one of the painting professors, who was to me he was just a really weird guy. He was into all these weird religions, and he would fast, and so he was fasting and studying the Aztecs at that time, but he was always into something. And he was homosexual, and anyway, he called me in for this conference. So I get out of my car in the parking lot, and I hear this voice speak to me very clear, and it says, Maureen, if you give yourself to art, it's the same as the world, which is the same as Satan. And I'm looking around in this huge parking lot, sea of cars, not a single person. I'm like, who said that to me? There's nobody even close. I mean, nobody. And so I responded, and I said, well, I don't know much about this religious stuff, but I know for sure I do not want to give myself to Satan, because that same friend of mine, we had experimented with different kinds of witchcraft and had real encounters with demons that just scared the bejesus out of me, So that's what I said, and then, no, hija, ¿puedes salir? ¿Puedes salir, hija? No, sí, es tuyo. No, ven aquí conmigo. No. So anyway, I go into this conference with the painting professor, and we're just talking, and I start thinking, what was the point of him calling me in here? We're just like shooting the breeze, and I'm thinking, it's not like we're friends and we just like talk to each other. He must have had some point. And so he answers my thoughts, and he says, the reason I called you in here was to talk to you about your talent and art and your commitment to art. And he says, if you ever want to do anything with your art, you're going to have to give yourself completely to it. And I'm thinking, man, they have all my money and they have all my time. I mean, what else is there to give to something, And and so we talked about it, and I was like, I was agreeable, but I was just like, I don't really understand what exactly he's getting at. So anyway, I left and went back home, and later that afternoon, it wasn't nighttime. No, hija. I was sitting in my bedroom, and Satan walks into my room. And if that voice hadn't spoken to me, I'm sure I would not have recognized him as Satan, because he was not ugly. He was so attractive. He was so beautiful. His eyes were so beautiful. He was so attractive. There was even a physical drawing towards him, and he was so beautiful. And he said to me, he said, Maureen, he said, I'll give you great or extraordinary talent. I'll make you world famous. I'll give you all the money you want, all the men you want, if you just bow down and worship. And I started crying, and I said, well, really, if I'm going to still be miserable like I am, live in this misery, then, I just want to die. I'd rather just die, even with all of that stuff, if I still am living in this pain. So then he starts again, and he says, Maureen, I'll give you extraordinary talent. I'll make you world famous. I'll give you all the money you want, all the men you want, if you just bow down and worship me. So I'm crying, and I'm going, just kill me, just kill me. So then he starts the list again, and he says, Maureen, I'll give you extraordinary talent. I'll make you world famous. I'll give you all the money you want, all the men you want, if you just bow down and worship me. And so then I'm thinking, what, can't he hear what I'm saying? And I think, well, maybe I'm not saying what he wants to hear. Shh, stop it. And so then I'm thinking, well, maybe he doesn't actually have the power to do what I'm asking him to do. Maybe he can't kill me. So then I think, well, okay, what do I do to get him to get him out of here, to stop this? Because I'm done with this experience. I mean, how do I change the channel? And how do I make him leave? And so immediately the thought comes into my head to call my sister, who she and her husband were working in a mission on the border of Mexico and Texas, and she was the first born again believer in our family. And this, the thought came in, call Mary. So I go into my studio, and I'm calling my sister on the phone, and I'm thinking, what am I going to tell her? Mary, Satan's in my room, and I can't make him leave. And I think, okay, I can't say that, because then she'll know I'm crazy, and I know I'm crazy, but I don't want everybody else to know how crazy I am, So I made something up, and I couldn't remember, but years later she told me that. She said the question I asked had to do with school, but she said that when the phone rang, she knew that it was me calling, and she knew whatever I said, that it was time for me to get saved, and so whatever I said, she was going to say Jesus. So what she told me was, the decision you need to make is for Jesus. So she prayed for me to get saved, and so I did. It was incredible. The love of God just came down on me, and I was just floating around on the love of God. So the next week I went into class, and there was this big conference room, like a common room in the art department, and it had a conference table, but along the walls it had these cabinets with doors, and so a bunch of people were there, and this painting professor comes out, and he greets me, and he says, so how was what happened this weekend? And I turned around and I said, oh man, I got saved. I gave my heart to Jesus, And I'm not exaggerating. It was like a fist punched him in the chest with a blow, and he went back up against those cabinets, and the breath was knocked out of him, and he never spoke to me again. I was still in his classes, but he never spoke to me directly again. He never addressed me. He never got close to me again. And the thing later that I saw was that apparently he was leading people into this relationship with Satan, that's what he was about. And this one artist that had graduated came back and did a show, and he said we all had to go, and he was like, this guy's really making it in the art world, and you should pick his brain. Well, when I went to his showing, all of the pictures had depictions of demons, and even some of them were saying Uncle So-and-so's demon, but they were beautiful, but then they'd have this grotesque something in them. And you could just see the oppression on this guy, and the torment. And there was a young man in a fellow student who before that, because we were like in the 3rd year of the program, and when he first came, he was just a country, really nice guy from the country, kind of simple, but he was a terrible artist, and we weren't being to him, but sometimes we would comment, how do you even get in the program, but one day he just had this epiphany, and he brought in this extraordinary painting, and from that point on, all his art was extraordinary, but his personality changed, and I could look back at it and go, well, he was becoming oppressed, and his whole personality, his whole values and everything changed, and he became really wild, and so anyway, about 2 weeks later, one of my friends picked me up who was a backslidden Christian. And I don't know why, but I was embarrassed to tell her, because she was a backslidden Christian, I was embarrassed to tell her that I was a Christian. And so she picks me up and she says, I've got this pot and it's not very good, but it's all I got, we're going to smoke it. And so I'm sitting there thinking, okay, well, if I don't tell her I'm a Christian, then I don't have a reason not to smoke pot with her. so I'm like, oh, it won't hurt, So she, she passes. So I take a couple of totes, and I'm just getting higher and higher and higher. And she's talking about, this is just, it's really bad quality. It's not, what a waste of time. And I'm sitting over there just getting higher and higher and higher. And I'm thinking, man, I'm higher than I've ever been on LSD or other things. I'm like, JD, you just have to take me home. So I go home, and I'm back in my studio, and I'm sitting there, and it's like the top of my head is coming off, and I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, how can this happen from just 2 tokes of bad pot? There is something really wrong, and I've never been at this out of control high in my life. And so then I think, well, call your sister. Call Mary on the phone. I go, Mary, I gotta tell you what I did. And she's like, what? I said, I went out with JD, we smoked some pot. She said, oh my God, Maureen, didn't you know that smoking pot opens the door to the devil? I was like, no, I didn't know that, So she starts praying deliverance over me. I didn't really understand what she was doing, but what I felt was 3 different things, like this fist down inside of me that was holding on, and she'd be praying, and then suddenly it'd have to let go and come out my mouth, and that happened 3 times. But one of the, and I felt clean inside. I was totally transformed. But I especially felt really clean inside. It was about a week later that I realized that I had not even thought a single cuss word since she prayed for me. And I'm telling you, when my friend and I worked at trying to quit cussing, I mean, we really worked at it. But at that time, I came to the point of realizing this was something bigger than me I couldn't control. And there, in one prayer, that was gone. And so anyway, that was like in September or something. Okay, in December, that sister in Texas was having her first baby, and so my mom was going to help her. And I was having a really hard time, so there were hardly any Christian. There was only one other Christian in the whole art department. He was a potter. And so, but I talked to my pastor about I wanted to go to a school where other Christians were. So he was from California, so he'd gone off to California. And anyway, I took my mom to the airport. And on the way back from the airport, I'm talking. And I'm going, God, my sister Mary, she's always been good. She was always good. Responsible, good, the middle child. And so being a Christian for her is easy, but I've never been good. And this is really hard, so I give up. I'm going to go sin, okay? So I go home and I'm making plans. Anyway, my brother ends up going to the bar with me. And so I'm in this bar and dancing, and my friend from the bikers, that grew up and stuff, she was going to school in Kentucky, and she came in for the weekend and walked in the bar, and there she sees me, and she gets all mad. So she comes out on the dance floor, and she jerks me by the arm, and she drags me off the dance floor and throws me in a chair in the back of the bar by the pinball machine and starts yelling at me. you can't be doing this, you're a Christian. And one of our other friends who was a backslidden Christian, Sherry, she's sitting at the bar. She turns around and goes, what do you care, Cindy? You're not a Christian either. And Cindy goes, it's none of your business. You stay out of it. So she's yelling at me, and then she starts beating the pinball machine to death, you know. And she's going, you've never been happy living this way. You'll never be happy living this way again. You can't do this. And I'm like, you know, and I'm thinking, just don't hit me, because she was really well known as a street fighter among back when we were in the bikers, you know, and I was still like, whatever you say, just don't hit me. So finally she says, okay, if you got to do this, then this is the way it's going to be. Okay, you got to go out with me and come back with me. You can't go off with any guys. You can smoke cigarettes, you can drink beer, but can't smoke any pot, and you can't do any drugs. That's it. And I'm like, okay, you know, just don't hit me. You know? So the next day, you know, before we were going out, I went by and we were talking, and she was telling me, she said, you know, this is so, she said, you were so transformed. She said, I was so excited that this was real. You know, everybody else we know that are Christians, they get saved and then it's nothing. And she said, so, you know, this is just really important, disappointing. I thought this was something real in your life. And I was like, yeah, me too. But then the excuse, well, Mary, she's always been good. It's easier for her, and so. And so anyway, we go off to the bar. But she's right on me. I mean, any old boyfriends that come around, she's like, move away, She's not going anywhere, And anybody invited me to say, no, she can't smoke pot, So anyway, this was Friday. Friday night is when she dragged me off this dance floor. Saturday night is when we went out. So Monday morning, my pastor has gotten back from California, and he shows up and says, surprise, Maureen, on the way back from California, I stopped in Dallas and I got you enrolled in Christ for the Nations. And he said, but they have special rules. You had to be off drugs and sex and saved for at least 6 months, but I got special permission because you hasn't been 6 months. And he said, but if you want to go, it's all set up, you can go. And I'm sitting there and I hear God. I think he's yelling. I think everybody can hear him. And he says, Maureen, you go to Dallas and I'll teach you how to walk with me. Or you stay here and you go back where you know you're going. So I'm thinking, I know where I'm going and I don't want to go there. And I know it's going to be worse than what I had been in before as far as evil is concerned. And so I said to him, well, I want to go. And I said, but I think I have to tell you what I did this weekend. So I tell him, I start to tell him, and he said, I'm sorry, but I really have to know exactly what you did because of the rules of the school. So then I'm like, well, actually, I didn't do much. I just went to the bar, I drank some beer, smoked some cigarettes. I didn't do any drugs. I didn't go off with anybody. Well, so he goes to the phone, and he calls Christ for the Nations back and talks to the dean of students. And I can hear him on the phone explaining, you just gave permission, special permission, but now this. And so then I hear him saying, yes, I will absolutely put my reputation on the line, that she will come there and she will not mess up. And I'm listening thinking, man, that is the stupidest thing I ever heard. I wouldn't do that for me. Pastor Jim, I didn't say this, but I'm thinking, you are a total idiot. I would not bet my reputation on me. I mean, come on, Anyway, he hung up the phone. He said, okay, it's all set up. So I'm going to drive out, and I tell my mom, and she freaks out, No, God, she's in Texas, right? And so she calls my grandmother and says, Maureen has gone crazy. And she, you got to stop her, And she's going to drive to Texas by herself in January. And so my grandmother comes to talk to me. And she asked me what's going on and everything. And I'm explaining. And she says, your mother called me. And she was very upset about this. And she said, I think your mother is correct that it's a bad idea for you to drive to Dallas. She said, but, so she says, I'm going to buy you a plane ticket. So my mom finds out. She's like, no, Mom, that is not what I meant. You were supposed to stop her from going, not get her a plane ticket. That totally missed the point. But my grandmother, I think she explained this to me later, that she had recognized before that if I didn't leave that area and the friends, that group of friends, that I would never get out of, like they were really a bad influence. So my friend Cindy, so now I tell her, and so I'm she comes over and I'm packing, and she, like I'm in my studio and she sits up on this wall thing and she says, man, she said, this whole thing is like really messing me up. You're a great Christian, and then you're going to sin, and we go to the bar, and now you're going to Bible school, and I think I got baptized the day before at the Y, pool at the Y, and she's going, I can't hardly keep up with going. She said, I was so worried about these decisions you were making because you're leaving school, and she said, I got down on my knees and I prayed. And I asked God what was going on. And then she goes in, and God spoke to me. I'm like, really? What'd he say? And she says, he said, I can't tell you. And I was like, okay, then you better not tell me. But what she did communicate was, but he did tell me that it was okay, that this was him. So I fly off to Dallas, smoke my last cigarette on the airplane, and actually after I got there, I remember sitting in this one meeting in a dorm meeting, and I'm looking around and going, man, all of these people are Christians, because there are hardly any real Christians really. And plus, after I got saved, the first book I read was Fox's Book of Martyrs. So I thought all the Christians were dead, the real ones were dead, And so I'm sitting there going, man, all of these people in here are Christians. And I'm thinking, and they think I'm a Christian. Oh yeah, I am. But anyway, some years later, I asked my friend Cindy. I was telling her the stuff I'd been doing for the last, it was probably 6 years later. I was telling her what I'd been doing, and she goes, oh my God, what he said was true. And I said, what are you talking about? She said, remember that night? She said, everything God told me that you were going to do, you've done. And I said, well, do you think you can tell me what he said now? And she said, yeah, I think I can. He told me that you were going to go to other countries and you were going to work with kids, and but mostly what he was saying was not to worry about you. That this big change and move was a good thing, and it was him, and and then she got saved. In fact, when I was in Bible school, we were talking on the phone, and she was, I don't remember what she was talking about, but her house was haunted, the house she grew up in, and we made it this big joke, but I guess we were talking about that, and I was going, what I'm learning here is that haunting isn't ghosts, it's demonic stuff, from people practicing witchcraft, and her mom had practiced witchcraft and stuff, so she's going, yeah, well, I'm here, and all this weird stuff's happening, and I go, well, do you want me to pray? And she's like, sure, pray, This was before she had become a Christian. And so I start praying and casting all these demons and stuff, and just praying away like a Bible school student would on the phone. and I'm just praying away, and then I'm not hearing anything. They're like, Cindy, are you still there? And she's like, yeah. She says, oh my God, you started praying and all this. It's like the darkness left, and there's a light in my house. And she said, I don't have any of the lights on, and it was late at night. She's going, but my house is filled with light now. And she says, so I'm like freaked. And I said, well, that's God. Light's God. It's good. Yeah. anyway, you know, we're really good friends still, and but anyway, that's how it got. So here I am, all these years later, and more and more, you know, because the transformation doesn't stop, you know, and you just get more and more free from sin, and you know, whatever battles you have with sin, if you apply the word and you fight it, then God, you are definitely going to get the victory. God gives you the victory over whatever it is you're struggling against, and you know, and all that stuff, all that abuse and stuff, like, you know, God, well, one of the first things that God healed me of in those first months of being saved, before that I had been going to a psychologist because I had really bad problems with depression, and especially at a certain time of year. And so my brother was a psychologist, so I went to one of his friends, and he was treating me. Anyway, he came to the conclusion that I had. See, it's not see. That he came to the conclusion that that I had suffered some trauma at that time of the year, and that I was. The problem was it was the anniversary, and I said, well, I don't remember anything like that. See. Okay. See, baby. So I was like, well, I don't remember anything. And he said, well, you probably repressed it, which means you can't remember it. So I'm like, yeah. So I didn't go back to him because I was like, what a cop out, what a racket, you know? I mean, okay, this is the problem, but you can't remember, so you repressed it, but I don't remember, so I can't say that's true. You didn't solve my problem either, you know? So after I got saved, I'm driving to school one day, and all of a sudden my car fills up with this light, and it's like gold dust is flying around in my car. And I'm driving, and all of a sudden I'm back at the Catholic Church, and I'm like 10 years old. No, baby. And I'm in class, and I keep raising my hand and answering a question. And the other kids are mad because they don't know the answers, and they're mad. And especially this one guy who I went to school with too, John, and he's like, and so I keep being, you know, I know, you know. And so then he's like behind it was a brother, behind the monk's back, he's going, if you answer another question, you know, you're going to pay for it. And I'm like, okay, you know, so I'm like, and they're asking questions and nobody's answering. I'm like, I can't stand it. So as soon as class is over, we go out, and like the church is up on the hill with a really long yard going down the hill to the street. Well, the kids start attacking me. John stirs them up, and they're really attacking me. And anyway, I end up at the bottom of the hill in the leaves like this, and they're running around throwing stuff at me and kicking me and stuff. And finally, the people at the church hear what's going on, and the monk comes out. And from the top of the hill, and all the kids run off, and I'm still there, and the monk is yelling down the hill, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yes," you know. So then I get up and dust all the leaves off, you know, and walk away. And the monk's going, "Are you sure you're okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, I'm fine," you know. So I walk all down the street, and then, you know, in the car with the gold dust flying around, I can remember the exact place in the sidewalk, walking home from church, thinking, I am never going to think about this again. So then I'm just healed, you know. I mean, that's all healed, and I just feel so loved by God. And every time I share that story, I just feel the love of God. So I go back to this psychologist, you know, this guy that I've just, you know, shredded and stopped, you know, thinking he's a quack. So I go back to him and I go, and I tell him what I actually thought about his diagnosis. And I say, but you know, it turns out you were right, you know. And so I shared with him about getting saved and about God's healing and stuff. And he was a livid atheist, hater of God. And so I'm telling him this whole story. And again, all I can feel is how much God loves me, you know. And so I finished telling him the whole thing, and he said, and I said, "So that's my testimony of